Welcome into another edition of Cuse's Corner right here on the Built-in Buffalo Network. This is Kevin Siracuse with you here. This is Tuesday, 2 days after the AFC Championship game, and I'm sure, like many of you, I needed a couple of days to really process what happened after the Bills came up short once again to the Kansas City Chiefs, losing in Arrowhead by a final score of 32-29. This is the fourth time in the last 5 seasons that the Bills have found themselves coming up short to Kansas City in the playoffs. Their 6th straight playoff exit. The first one was against Houston back in 2019. So I know, take that one with a grain of salt, but 5 consecutive playoff exits during this Josh Allen era. And now the question is, when is it finally going to be Buffalo's time, as Josh Allen is not getting any younger? So that being said, let's start right at the top. First of all, the Bills did not make enough plays once again because Kansas City just has that way. Give them credit. They are a very good team at pulling out these one-score games. 17 consecutive one-score wins now for Kansas City. That's an NFL record. So they just have that ability to be able to kick it up a notch in the playoffs and find that extra gear. And they know how to pull out these games. The Bills have yet to figure that out. So it was way too slow of a start for Buffalo. Josh Allen looked very nervous. You could tell he had the jitters, as I'm sure many of us did, but we're sitting at home watching it. We're not on the field. So it was way too slow of a start for the offense and for the defense because the defense didn't force a third down until the second quarter. So fast forwarding to the end of the game, this just quick synopsis here. The defense finally comes up with a big stop. They really hadn't done that all day, but when you needed them most, give them credit. They held Kansas City to a field goal. And when you have 3:33 and all 3 timeouts left, you would like to think that Josh Allen can at least get you in field goal range to tie the game. If not, wind that clock down, go on those long sustaining Joe Brady drives that we've grown accustomed to all season, and then potentially score the game-winning touchdown, leaving Patrick Mahomes no time. But again, give Kansas City credit. Steve Spagnuolo outcoached Joe Brady on that final drive. And I think a big question is, where was James Cook, who was averaging 8.5 yards per touch? James Cook was literally untouchable on Sunday night, but he did not see the field on that final drive. So I think the easy answer is to say, well, Ty Johnson is used for pass protection. It was just different personnel packages. But I think when you have that moment and when you have James Cook running as well as he was and even catching passes as well as he was, you need him in there. I know that there are a lot of, short scenarios where you have Ray Davis out there, Reggie Gilliam, or like I said, Ty Johnson. You bring in those heavy packages, but you got to find a way to get James Cook involved. And I guess I'll just say this right now. One of the biggest kryptonites for the Bills on Sunday night was those short yardage situations, because as great of a play as it was all season long, it seemed unstoppable. But Kansas City had that extra day of rest, and I'm sure that they were game planning on how to stop Josh Allen on Buffalo's version of the tush push. And I was saying throughout the second half, I was like, you got to have a plan B, whether it's a leak out to Ty Johnson, an end around, a jet sweep, something. You cannot just keep running Josh Allen. And sure enough, he mentioned yesterday at his press conference that he was playing with an injured wrist that he injured right before halftime on one of those sneaks. So if you know that, you got to come up with something else. That is part of the reason why you signed Curtis Samuel this offseason, so he can run some of those trick plays or those jet sweeps. Now, this is not the time to try that in the AFC Championship game when it matters most, but that should have been in the bag. Those should have been the plays that you should have been working on, because you were going to find a team that was able to stop it. And if the Bills were able to win and move on to Philadelphia, they were the inventors of this tush push. So I'm sure that they know how to stop it. Whether they can or not, that remains to be seen. But you have to be able to go to plan B. And Steve Spagnuolo just totally outcoached Joe Brady. As much as I love Joe Brady, and it came out Saturday night that he is going to be back in Buffalo next season as he turned down the New Orleans Saints job. So I think that is great. But just the way that whole final drive came together, it was just another heartbreaker. And I would be remiss if I didn't show this right here. Dalton Kincaid. When Josh Allen is able to pull off this miraculous throw, Kansas City disguised their coverage, and they came out with this all-out blitz in Josh Allen's face, and he somehow pulls off that throw. This right here could have been the play of the year. I know Jim Nantz said that the Josh Allen run during Kansas City was a play of the year, but this would have gone down in the history books if Josh Allen somehow completed this. Again, credit to Spagnuolo, because the Chiefs did not show that. The Bills were not prepared for that. Something with the coverage, and the protection wasn't lined up. And sure enough, there they are in Josh Allen's face. Now, this would have been a very tough play for Dalton Kincaid, and it was later confirmed by Dawson Knox that Kincaid was playing with the torn PCL in one knee and his other knee was aggravated. So he was definitely banged up, but he was drafted for his hands. That was what he was highly touted on. He has some of the best hands in that class. And where were they on Sunday night? So again, it would have been a very tough play, and I'm not blaming Dalton Kincaid for that loss, but that is a play that you have to have. That's going back to last year when Diggs dropped it. You're thinking, okay, who's going to step up and make the play? It was almost like history repeating itself once again. Now, as much as the Bills did not find that way to make that one final play, because if Kincaid made that catch, they're already in field goal range. And then that's when you can get James Cook on the field and you can just wind out the clock and hopefully go on that game-winning drive, score in the final seconds, game over. But I also need to mention something else that definitely impacted that game, and that was the officiating. Now, I tweeted this, and last I checked, 1.5 million views, thousands of comments, specifically from Chiefs fans, just being sore winners, coming after me and giving their 2 cents. But you know what? If you're looking at this objectively, we really need to talk about this. Because, as I said, the Bills didn't do enough to win. But, number one, the pass to Worthy that hit the ground. That hit the ground. Yeah, I know he had control, but 31 other teams, if that ball hits the ground, you know it's going to be incomplete. Then there's a delay of game where all of a sudden, apparently, you're allowed to blend the play clock in with the game clock. Are we serious? Is that in the rule book? I've never been aware of that. And now Jim Nantz and Tony Romo said it, but that was the first time I'd ever heard of it, where the play clock was literally at 0. The game clock was at 2:01. Hey, you know what? Let's just call it the 2-minute warning. Then Kansas City scores. Travis Kelce gets in Damar Hamlin's face. Jordan Phillips comes to stick up for his teammate. Who gets flagged? Of course, the Buffalo Bills. Then you go to that 41-yard punt return from Kansas City. There were multiple holds, multiple blocks in the back. Nothing was called. And then the biggest one, the 4th down conversion, where the one ref originally said that Allen got it, and then the other ref said that he didn't. They conversed, and I tweeted this, and I said, I will be shocked if the Bills get it, because this is just the exact type of play that they will give to Kansas City, and they gave it to Kansas City. So, as I said, that is 5 plays that directly impacted the outcome of this game, and they all went Kansas City's way. Just brutal. And again, they've won 17 one-score games now, and it's just so frustrating when all these controversial calls go their way. And I'll add another one in there too. Right before that 4th down conversion, it looked like Dawson Knox had it. If you go and watch a replay, it looked like he extended his arm, picked up the first before that elbow and the knee came down. So really, those are 6 plays. And if you want to add a 7th in there, Greg Rousseau had his helmet ripped off too. So again, I'm not saying that the Bills lost because of the refs, but they definitely impacted the outcome of that game. And a lot of people are talking about it now. It's not just me or other Bills fans. And that's why it's so hard to make that one extra play, because you have to play perfect football, because you have to beat the Chiefs, and then you have to deal with the questionable officiating, because when you think you finally made a play, they either take it back from you or they grant it to Kansas City. So that's just something that the Bills are going to have to overcome, is finding that way to kick it into that extra high gear so that this doesn't happen once again. So now the question is, as we will talk about for the next 6 months, where do the Bills go from here? And without getting into it too much, because I'm really not in off-season mode yet, but the first thought that comes to my mind is go get me Max Crosby. Go get me someone who can actually finish these games and get on Mahomes. He can put pressure on the quarterback, because Von Miller isn't doing it. And as much as I like Greg Rousseau, I said this on the Going Deep Buffalo podcast the other night, he only shows up regular season, maybe in 1 or 2 playoff games. He goes to sleep in the biggest moments. And that's exactly what he did. As other people were saying, that was one of the worst games that he's played in his career. Now, credit to Ed Oliver. I thought he played pretty well for the most part, but the defensive line as a whole just has this problem with not being able to finish the job. And again, they made the plays when they needed to on that 4th quarter drive, but Kansas City hadn't scored more than 30 points all season. They scored 30 against Tampa Bay, whose defense was terrible, and 30 against Carolina, who finished with 4 wins. Buffalo was the first team to give up more than 30 points to these Chiefs. So go get me a Max Crosby. And that being said, people are starting to get on Brandon Beane too, because if you look at the last 4 top overall selections for the Bills, 2021, Greg Rousseau. I just mentioned him, went silent during the biggest game of the year. 2022, you traded up for Kyer Elam, and he looks like he should never even see the field again. 2023, you trade up for Dalton Kincaid, arguably the biggest drop of the year. 2024, you trade back. You don't trade up. I was a big fan of Brian Thomas Jr., but you trade back. You get Keon Coleman. You literally give Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs. Now, I was never a big Xavier Worthy guy, but it really hurts when you see that he has 6 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown, and Keon Coleman has 1 catch for 12 yards. You combine Coleman's stats with Kincaid's, 3 catches for 25 yards from last year's first-round pick and this year's top overall pick, which I know was slid back into the second round. But your last 2 pass catchers that you drafted highly can't even get more than 3 catches for 25 yards. That is why I think that while Brandon Beane is still a great GM, and you can say, well, look what he's done with James Cook, Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford, Matt Milano, all these guys, right? And actually, Matt Milano was drafted in 2017. But Brandon Beane has been able to find these gems, and he's a very, very good GM. So I don't want to take anything away. And I'm not saying that he needs to be fired or Sean McDermott, because this was not a Sean McDermott game. And really, I think that McDermott has made significant progress this year. But what I'm saying is use that first-round pick this year, which happens to be number 30, and then don't forget the Bills still have that extra second from the Stephon Diggs trade. So if you have to use that, go ahead. And if you want to throw in Kyer Elam, do it. Go get Max Crosby. Give Vegas a first, a second, and Kyer Elam for Max Crosby. Or if you want to trade with Cleveland, Myles Garrett, go ahead. Because the Bills need a proven finisher, because Brandon Beane's track record of drafting first-round talent, even high second-round picks, has not been that good. And again, I love Brandon Beane, but I think this is the year you need to make that splash, just like Stephon Diggs. That was a first-round pick back in 2020. Do that this year in 2025 and say, this year we're going to get a Max Crosby. So I think, again, without getting into it too much, that is priority number 1. I could also listen to a big priority of getting an actual wide receiver 1, because Amari Cooper was not the Amari Cooper that we had hoped for when the Bills traded for him. Now, I don't know if that was because he wasn't acclimated to the offense or Joe Brady just didn't want to use him. Maybe Josh wasn't looking his way. Whatever the case may be, the Bills are going to have to seriously evaluate that position, because Matt Collins was great. And I think Matt Collins needs to re-sign with this team. The Bills need to re-sign Matt Collins. But he should not be your leading receiver in the AFC Championship game. So between an edge rusher and wide receiver, I think those are 2 big needs right there. And I would just say cut Von Miller, save money right there, make Crosby more affordable. And then, as I was just saying, you re-sign key players like Matt Collins, Ty Johnson, and Reed Ferguson. So to finish with some positivity, the Bills really weren't supposed to make it that far this year. A lot of people did not have them making the AFC Championship game, and a lot of people didn't even have them making the playoffs in general. So the fact that they were able to have that successful of a season during a transition year, during a rebuild year, when they got rid of all of those older players and contracts, they had all that dead cap, especially from the Stephon Diggs trade. They really had no salary cap to work with. I think that says a lot about this team. So now that they do have more money to work with, they won't have all that dead cap. They have the draft capital. I think that this team's window is still open for many years, especially while they have Josh Allen. But again, you're not going to have him in his prime that much longer. As hard as that is to think about, we got to be realistic and say that he's going to be 29 next year. So now the Bills just have to continue to make the right steps. They need to make the right moves so that they can get over the hump against Kansas City. And as the great Marv Levy used to say, fight on, my men. A little I am hurt, but not yet slain. I'll just lie down and bleed a while, and then I'll rise and I'll fight again. Thank you for watching Cuse's Corner throughout the year. We will continue to have coverage for you. Just because the Bills lost doesn't mean that we are going to not create content for you guys anymore. So appreciate all the likes, all the subscriptions. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Kevin_Syracuse. Make sure you subscribe to my personal channel, Kevin Syracuse, and make sure you follow Built in Buffalo on all of our platforms. Thank you guys again. And as always, go Bills.